For real. For real. Okay. Okay, it looks like if I'm in the right stream, it looks like Doug is here, Hippie Go Lucky is here, Cecilia is here, BBR is here. Very cool. Lots of people are hopping on, and I am broadcasting tonight from both Facebook and YouTube again. So, yay! Double the technology, double the mistakes. So, welcome everybody to the live stream. And this is my second time doing this. So, I'm going to be going back and forth trying to juggle both, and we'll see how it goes. And the more technology I add, the more stuff is stacked up here, and I I can't move because everything's going to come toppling down. So it's pretty ridiculous, the setup that I have going on, I have to admit. So let's see. How's everybody doing tonight? What's going on? Ethan is here. Tony's here. Misty's here. Diana, Chris, Christopher. Hello, hello. Oh, let's see. Overcoming Understanding is here and saying that the video is frozen. Cecilia says, I got a mosquito bite on Monday because we were around a river. That's cool. That you're on the river, not the mosquito bite. But it sounds like you guys are having fun, so that's the cool part of that. So I was thinking, and I keep meaning to do this as well. What I'm thinking about doing is printing out some comments and maybe starting the live stream with like me commenting on previous comments. What do you guys think about something like that? Would that be good? Oh, okay. Lewis asks, let's kickstart off the topic then, Dana. What was the craziest aha moment with both of your narcs? I don't know if it was like the craziest necessarily, but some of the craziest moments were, I would say, with Steve. I think I mentioned this before. We were talking one night, and he was asking me about Jack and my experience with all that, and I had made the comment that I think people are inherently good, and that if Anne Frank can believe that, then so can I. And he had made the comment, well, she said that before she got to the concentration camp. And like, and he's right, but wow. I mean, that just, I had never thought of it that way before. And the fact that he had, and this is before obviously I knew anything was even up with him, it was just so unnerving because that just struck me as so incredibly evil that somebody would even, I don't know, just the thought process, and that was really disturbing. That was an aha moment that there was probably a problem there with him. Jack, my aha moment with Jack, that his issues were so far beyond the realm of normal, was so like I had found out that what he was up to on Craigslist, because he was cheating on me with everybody in town and probably within a 500-mile radius. Like, he was very active, and it was finding like the moment of clarity for me with that was seeing him use my pet name for him as his screen name for a dating site. I think it was for Plenty of Fish. So that he'd used my pet name for his screen name. So to me, it was just that level of indifference. And it just showed that he didn't care, like, at all, that he was emotionally completely checked out. So that was exactly what I needed to see, because it was the clarity that I was looking for, because I probably would have stayed with him and I would have tried to make things work. And I probably would have thought he had a sex addiction or, something else. So I didn't realize that people could have like a personality like this. So I guess, yeah. Lewis says, with anything that moved. Yeah, he was, yeah. Yeah, pretty much. Hippie Girl Lucky says, yeah, that's so rude, the pet name thing. Wow. That was incredibly painful. Again, it just showed that none of it meant anything to him. Vicky asks, please give some insight on what comes after Narc 101. I filed a restraining order and I'm about to file a motion for contempt, but I'm scared of the retaliation. I'd love to provide details. So that is a great question. All any of us can do is to anticipate as best as we possibly can. And in these situations, it can be difficult, but I would really encourage you to try to, and this is going to, maybe sound paranoid to some people, but really kind of plan for the worst and hope for the best. So keep everything in writing, because when you end a relationship with a person who craves power and control, and to them this is all a game and that they need to win, they play to win. And it's a lot like kicking a bee's nest. Like you really need to have a plan in place before you kick that bee's nest, because you don't want to have to come up with it after the fact. So for me personally, I would get some sort of personal protection, something that you're comfortable using. I would get multiple forms of personal protection. So you have in your car, in your purse, by your front door, by your back door, by your bed, as much as possible. So if he does come around, because they generally don't like it when you put a restraining order on them, because it's they're losing control over the situation. And in their mind, we belong to them, and how dare we call off the game before they could. So just really, okay. Vicky says, I bought a gun. If you buy a gun, here's the thing with guns. I'm not opposed to guns. And of course, my disclaimer, depending on state laws, like I don't condone or, confirm or deny any use of handguns. But if you're going to own a gun, you need to really know how to use one. And that means extensive target practice. And that also means preparing yourself emotionally and mentally to potentially use it on a human being that you at one point loved. And because you don't want to hesitate with something like that, because that's when weapons can be used against you. So I'm a big fan personally of bear mace, because I know myself well enough to know if I had a gun, I would probably hesitate to use one. And it takes a person a while to become good at owning, and using a gun. It's not like in the movies where you fire. It's really hard if you've got a handgun and you've got, 6 rounds, to actually hit a target to the point of disabling a target is really hard to do, especially a moving target. And so, just kind of keep that in mind. Just target practice if you're going to use it. I would really have multiple forms of protection. It's in having something that you're not going to hesitate at all to use. Bear mace, and I have my can by my bed. It's about like this. It's probably about, what is that? I don't know, 8-10 inches tall, and it's big. It's like an extinguisher, and you discharge it and it shoots for about 30 feet, and it'll die a person. It's for use on a charging bear, But to me, it's kind of one and the same, because you've got a person that's really aggressive. They're all hopped up on adrenaline. It's, a charging predator of any kind is the same. So, but it'll dye them orange or purple. So other people can, you can call the police and say, yeah, I've got this person's, bright purple and they're running around. So, yeah, like he says, bear mace is pretty intense. It can send people to the ER. Yeah, it totally can. So, obviously something to keep in mind if you're going to use any type of protection at all, for whatever reason, and, just obviously if you have little kids in the house, to let them know not to touch it and keep it safe and all that. Vicky says, I'm not terribly afraid he's going to physically come after me. It's the smear campaign he's threatening, and he's beginning already. That's the court motions, but I'm scared to proceed. Yeah, well, I don't blame you. I think that's totally normal to be scared. This is a scary situation. And, all you can do is all you can do. You can't stop him from saying whatever he's going to say. All you can try to do is tell people that, that your relationship with him, it was very toxic. I would try to stay as like calm and level-headed about it, because these people are so convincing. So, but if he's painting you as this completely irrational person, that's probably what he's doing, to do the opposite. So to stay incredibly calm and rational and reasonable, and letting people know, if he's telling, I would even tell them, you know what, he's already telling people all kinds of stuff, and none of it's true. It's all a bunch of craziness, and I just hope that if he tells you anything about me or about us, that you at least ask me about it before just taking his word for face value. And then really at the end of it all, when it's all sorted out, you'll know like who's your real friends and who's not. So, okay, Therese, oh wait, let me scroll up. Teresa says, I've been no contact with my ex for 10 months. I just got contacted by her saying that her father is dying of cancer. How should I handle this? I was very close with her dad after a 5-year relationship. My guess is this is most likely a hoover. This is what they do. Hold on a second. My throat is really dry today for some reason. It's very common for them to say that they're dying of cancer, that somebody close to them is dying of cancer, that they're suicidal, that somebody is suicidal. Very, very common. If you're really that close to her father, I guess, first off, if you were that close to her father, you'd probably know that he was dying of cancer, A. And then B, if you have his email or his phone, then you could call him directly. But, frankly, I wouldn't even do that, because these things crack the door open for communication. And even if it's true, even if he is dying of cancer and all of this, you're putting yourself at risk. And that's something like you have to really go into self-protection mode now and just be like, you know what, you could like send a card to her dad or something, but stay no contact. Like stay no contact, stay no contact, stay no contact. It's not worth putting yourself in harm's way. So that's a good idea. Wolf and Company says a big can of wasp spray works very well, kind of in lieu of bear mace. Yeah, that's a good idea. So Postmodern was asking if we could not talk about wasp spray and guns, please, because it's triggering. I understand that it's triggering. There's a lot of things that we say in here that are triggering, and I know that there's a lot of people right now that are feeling very hypervigilant and on edge about things, but at the same time, there's a lot of people in here that are really in in harm's way. And so it's kind of a fine line for me to walk, but we can change the topic now. So, let's see. Yeah. And then the whole thing, like when you've got like the smear campaign and everything else, I heard a great quote the other day, and it said something like, don't worry about your reputation, worry about your character. And that's so, so, so true. So, people can say whatever they're going to say about us and about our reputation. And it doesn't take a lot for a person to say things and to ruin a person's reputation. But if your character is solid, your reputation will survive it. So just focus on doing the right thing. Focus on being the kind of person that you know that you are and that you know that you want to be. The rest will sort itself out. It may take some time, but it really will sort itself out. Yes, Shades of Joe says, reputations can be faked, character can't. So, let's see. Nancy says, yep, they lie. I had an ex tell me his father had died. I bought it and ended up back with him. His dad was alive. Yeah, you have to realize when you're dealing with a person who lies, they are a liar. And there are no boundaries. Like, there are no boundaries with the liar. To them, they feel justified in saying whatever they want to say. And they have all kinds of excuses. So just realize that. Rob was asking about pepper spray made for humans. I'm just going to answer this question postmodern, and then I promise we'll switch the topic. So pepper spray does somewhat work for people, but the range is a lot less. It's generally about 5 to 7 feet. The stream is a lot less. It's it's not very much. And you really have to be close to that person. To me, pepper spray is very much a false sense of security. And I highly recommend people, whatever you get, you need to know how to use it. So with pepper spray or wasp spray or any of that, to go outside and do a spray and see how wide is the stream, how far does it shoot, what is it like with wind, because these are all things to take into consideration. So there's going to be some kickback, or a lot of kickback, if it's a windy day. So if you spray it, you need to know to close your eyes and look the other way, or else you're going to mace yourself. So lots of things to consider, that it's just worth testing out before you actually need to. Yes, that's a great comment. Wolf says, I had a Hoover situation. I spoke with my narcissist. He ended up telling everyone I was contacting him, saying I was crazy. Be careful. Yes. So they will do that. You have to really be careful whenever you reopen contact, because they'll kind of knock on the door with those hoovers. If you open it, everything with a narcissist or an emotional manipulator will be used against you. If not in the immediate future, down the road it will be. So, okay, so for Vicky, your situation, she says, do you suggest I back off and stop the lawyer from filing the motion for contempt, and let him have his finger on the trigger of a smear campaign? Or do I fight for my freedom? I'm so confused. That's a tough call, and that's totally up to you. I'm not really sure that there's a right answer with that. He's going to continue to say what he's going to say. My guess would be, I'd put money on it. And filing a motion for contempt, whatever, slander, libel, whatever he's doing, you can get him on that. But again, I would ask your attorney kind of what's worst case scenario? Like, what are you really looking at here? Because my guess would be it's going to be some minor fines that he's going to continue to fight. And he's going to still continue to paint himself as the victim of you, that you're crazy, that you're trying to silence him, that he's, you know what I mean? So I just would be very, go with your gut on it, but realize that they don't care about laws, and things really don't stop them. But and that, I mean, really, that's like a good question for your attorney, and it's kind of how much you want to fight with all of this. Yes, that's great advice. Lauren says, Vicky, do whatever is going to make you feel safe and sane. Yes, 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 yes. I agree. Kindness says, I was just brutally discarded after 3 years. How long before I stopped feeling like I did something wrong? I think that depends on the person. And I guess the fastest way to stop feeling like you did something wrong is to really kind of see the situation clearly for what it is, and to change your perspective of things. So once, you know, and really, I think a lot of that comes from being in support groups, talking to other people, and just education, watching as many videos and stuff as you can about that. So, you know, once you really see like, oh, there's a pattern to their behavior, this is what they do, that you're not alone in this, that it's a very, even though his behavior or her behavior is incredibly seemingly like unpredictable to you, that it's not like it runs a pretty set course, and that we've all been through a lot of the same things. So, and they do that. So they'll bring a person up to like the highest highs where you're feeling like they are your soulmate. You feel this amazing, intense connection. And then they kick that chair out from underneath the person. They send you to the lowest of lows, and then they blame you. So, you know, it's devastating, but it's meant to be devastating. That's why they do this. It's in part to get a reaction out of you. Yes, Ryan, great point. Ryan says belief is a big part of it too. You have to believe that you weren't doing things wrong. You have to learn to trust yourself. And a lot of self-talk is huge in this, like reiterating to yourself, like, this, I am not crazy. Like, this was not me. Normal people don't do that. Normal people don't go from like Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde. They don't go from fairy tale relationship to, Lifetime TV movie or total nightmare at the flip of a switch. Like, none of that's normal. And keep repeating that to yourself. Like, this is not normal. This is not normal. And this is not my fault. Like, and yes, somebody had mentioned the book Psychopath Free. Fantastic book. It's so incredibly validating, because he really does go through all of the different emotions that people feel when they're in the thick of it. And he discusses that, the kind of the guilt of, oh my God, did I just lose the best thing that ever happened to me? And what did I do wrong? And what's so wrong with me? And how can I get back this amazing relationship that I thought we had? But once you see, really, like, that book, like, once you read that book, you're like, oh, okay. It makes so many things make so much sense. So, okay, so Vicky, back to your situation. I would send out a message to all 200 of your Facebook friends and let them know that you and your ex broke up, that he's basically friended all of them, and, if they're your friends, then they should understand, like, your side of things. So Kindness was saying, yes, it was like the switch flipped, and that's so hard. I mean, this is why they call them emotional manipulators, because they send people on those really high highs and then the really low lows. And that is, it's devastating to be on that crazy train, because oftentimes you'll have, spans of time where the relationship is fantastic, and you think, oh, we've really turned a corner. This really is going to be different. And then out of the blue, like a month or 3 months or whatever into it, they radically change. And then it's all of a sudden you did something wrong, generally challenging them in some sort of way. And then they'll you know, either break up with you or do silent treatment or some sort of like punishing behavior to get you back in line. So Solution says, my female ex-narcissist was 32 years old, divorced with 2 kids, but said I was her second boyfriend. I don't believe her since she was a serial dater. Why do they keep their relationships a secret? I think in part because they can. It's fun. It's fun for them to have secrets and lies and the manipulation. And then maybe for her, it's just the fantasy of, I think a lot of them, it's that way. Like they just want to believe what they say. So in their mind, if they say, well, I've only had 2 relationships, then they're almost, it's like, that's the fantasy that they want to believe. So that's the fantasy that they tell other people. They lie. They lie when the truth would serve them better. They lie. If their mouths are moving, they're lying. They're lying or manipulating. So yeah, Teresa, 1 day no contact. That's awesome. She said he would be perfect, and then the silent treatment would start. He did tell me that he did not like himself or anyone else. And, a lot of times too, with that kind of stuff, that's part of the whole like pity ploy of, I'm just kind of this baby bird with a broken wing and I'm wounded and I need you to save me. And I just have all of these issues. And a lot of times we feel obligated to stay and to try to save them, but they can only save themselves. All it's going to do, if we stick around, all it's going to do is sink us. So Doug, yes. Doug says the Buddha board is back. Yes, it is. I really tried hard to get it into the shot tonight because you wanted it last week, and I didn't even realize that you couldn't see it. So yeah, they just. Narja says, do narcissists have more than one supply? Generally, I mean, every type of narcissist is a little bit different. Like some feed their ego through multiple partners, and then some feed their ego through like their career or different things of like public image, awards, advanced degrees, working a lot, these kinds of things. It just depends. But if they are more of like what's called the somatic narcissists, which are the, somatic meaning like body. So they're more of the very sexual ones. They definitely do tend to have multiple people in line at all the time. Oh gosh. Solution says yes. One day she would say it was the best relationship, and almost 2 weeks later saying it was a mistake and it didn't mean anything. And then hoovering, asking if I was okay. Yeah, it's a big crazy making train. It's awful. Awful. So, it's just normal relationships have issues, but normal relationships don't have highs and lows like that. So if you're in a situation where you're kind of wondering, especially if there's confusion, like that's kind of the telltale sign if you're dealing with an emotional manipulator, is there's confusion that never seems to get cleared up. It's circular conversations. It's a staggering degree of immaturity. It's like you feeling like you've misremembered or misheard, or turning yourself inside and out trying to figure out what the heck is going on, where you're like, is it them, or is it me? Am I too sensitive? Can I not take a joke? Do I have issues because of my ex? Like, what is going on? There's a concept in the book Psychopath Free, and it's fantastic. And the concept is that of a constant. And so a constant is basically somebody that you feel like constant around. So you're not having these extreme, like, confusion and jealousy and anger and upset, and you're not like emotionally all over the place. You feel really even keel. And so it can really be helpful if you're, especially when you're dating, to ask yourself, okay, so like, for example, for me, my brother is my constant, and he's a very solid guy. He's a good guy. He's good to women. He's very on the level. And so if I ever encounter any type of behavior that I think is weird, I ask myself, what would Victor do? And then by asking myself that, I can kind of tell, like, because generally the answer is he would never do that. Or, if I were to send him that text or whatever, he would flat out say, he's like, Dana, that's crazy. Like, like, what? Peace out. So if that's the response that I would get from my constant, I really take that to heart. I would encourage you to do the same. It's such a great way to view it, because it helps you to see things from a perspective of somebody that that you trust and that you feel safe around. David says, yes, Dana, that kind of thinking almost killed me, and that's when I knew something was terribly wrong. BB says, can I borrow Victor? You can. He's so cute. I love my baby bro, even though he's not a baby anymore, but in my mind, he's like forever like 15. It's weird. Kindness says, so he doesn't care that I'm heartbroken, or was that the goal? No, I'm sorry. He doesn't. They don't care. They don't care that you're heartbroken. And I hate having to tell people that, but they don't. It's not you. I think that's the most important thing to realize, that it's not you. You did nothing wrong. There's nothing. Nobody can make a relationship work with an emotional manipulator like this. So these people have a lot of issues, and when they bring somebody up, and then they kind of have this whole relationship that's manufactured, and there's all of these they're talking about love and all of these things, they bring somebody up and then they drop them like that. If you were to tell him, like, and continue to go back and say, oh my God, I'm so hurt, I love you, I'll do anything to make this work, all of this stuff, this feeds their ego, makes them feel very important. So a lot of that is exactly why they're doing it. And it's why they hoover. It's why they do a lot of what they're doing. And it's really hard to understand and to wrap our mind around that there are people out there that do stuff like this. And they do this they keep doing it. So he's done this many times before. He's going to do this forever. Like, that's just who they are. It's how they're wired. So if you are feeling incredibly hurt, it's really best to not say a word to them, because it's going to make things worse. So, because it makes them feel smug and superior. Support groups are fantastic for things like this. There's lots of them out there. There's a handful on Facebook. All of my contact info is in the About section on YouTube, or you can go to my website, thriveafterabuse.com, and go to support group and find out more information there. Yeah, but yes, also too, a lot of them will do that intentionally. They'll bring somebody up to a high and then drop them. And that kind of behavior, that can push people to suicide. And you would think that if you were to say, like, oh, I'm feeling suicidal, I miss you, I love you, I can't believe you're doing this, that you would think that would somehow maybe get through to them, but it doesn't. It just makes them feel more important. And if a person does try to commit suicide, it just reinforces that we're crazy and that they're not the problem. So it makes all of it is just, there's so many layers of like hurt and heartache and chaos and craziness to all of this. So Kat says, can people read these comments if they're not a member of your site? These comments, as far as I know, after the live stream, they are not on YouTube anymore. So right now it's just like comments during this. I have 2 different support groups, just kind of FYI, for different security reasons. So I have the support group on for this reason. I have the support group on my website, thriveafterabuse.com. It's an open support group, which means anybody can see what you're posting. However, you can choose your screen name. And then I have a closed group on Facebook where you can join, but you're generally joining with your Facebook profile that you have. So, if you don't want anybody following into the Facebook group, make sure to set up a fake profile or something like that. Yes, there's lots of flying monkeys around there. I strongly encourage you guys to set up fake profiles. Don't use your real name. Use a picture that doesn't have your face in it if you're even remotely concerned about any issues whatsoever. So let's see. Yes, and Cecilia and Doug are on Troll Patrol tonight. So we'll add a few more real quick here. Satar asks, when narcissists have more than one supply intact, which mine did anyone suffer? Oh, is your question STDs? How come these narcs ain't worried about disease? Okay, yeah, you were asking about STDs. I really think it's that level of arrogance where they're very impulsive. Their brain, as far as like judgment, critical thinking, logic, and reason, is really that of a teenager. So they're very impulsive, and they do things and then they deal with consequences. So yeah, a lot of them do have STDs. A lot of them, who was it? Was it Charlie Sheen? I think it was Charlie Sheen, who was HIV positive and didn't tell his fiance, and was on the TV show, and he had like everybody was really upset because he didn't feel like he needed to disclose that to anybody for any reason. So I can see maybe not disclosing to your coworkers, but to your fiance, yes. But it's just that level of entitlement that narcissists have. Yes, Amanda says they derive pleasure from our pain. They have no remorse and no conscience. Yes, this is so true. And then here's the added thing for those of you guys that are new, something else to kind of anticipate is what they will often do after the discard is they will move on very quickly. Like within sometimes days or weeks or like a month. And then and it's incredibly painful if you don't know to expect that. It's still painful even if you know to expect it, but it's really painful when you don't see it coming. If you're still kind of thinking that, you somehow messed things up, that you were really in a real relationship with, a normal, balanced, emotionally mature person. And so when they do move on, then they tend to tear down all of your pictures off of Facebook and social media. They're very quick to put up their new supplies, pictures, or to get engaged or to get remarried. And it's this whole, and which adds to the level of crazy making and the level of hurt and heartache, because a lot of that's done to really reinforce that you're the problem, that they're not the problem. But the thing is, healthy, well-balanced adults do not move on that fast, ever. Like, that's not healthy, balanced behavior at all. Most other people can see that, but in their mind, they think that that's a sign that they're not the problem. So, yes, Ryan was saying, mine used to change his status on Facebook to single, to complicated, to in a relationship, back and forth. And they do that. And especially if they have multiple people going at the same time, it's kind of their way to like pacify, everybody all at once. So if they have their status as, it's complicated, well, then, there's always excuses, right? Then they can tell people, oh, well, I don't want anybody in our business. And that's why I have it as I am single, or it's complicated, or I just don't want anybody bothering you because my ex is crazy, or it's always something. But again, normal people don't do stuff like that. Like, you don't have to continually wonder why your partner is doing that. Like, normal people, if they're in a relationship, they have no problem with saying that they're in a relationship. They have no problem, after like a length of time, they have no problem tagging each other in photos. They have no problem, leaving their computer open, leaving their phone around. They're not like on lockdown with all of their technology, and they're not, like removing tags if you've tagged them on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. They're not they don't do squirrely stuff. They don't have, glitches with social media. They don't have all these excuses. So it's, Regina asks, can believing in God help narcissists if they are really motivated to change, or is it more likely to be part of the mask to make them look good? It's more likely to be the mask to make them look good, because it's kind of how they're wired. And yes, religion can be great, and it can heal a lot of people of a lot of things, but they really need like intensive psychotherapy on an ongoing basis for years, if not decades, because it's not just the behavior that's the problem. It's why they're doing what they're doing, that's the problem. And until that's addressed, they're going to continue having behaviors, because again, normal balanced people, they don't do silent treatment. They don't do gaslighting. They don't have flying monkeys. They don't hoover. They don't have the whole sweet mean cycle. They don't do the idealize, devalue, discard. They don't have the emotional maturity of a 14-year-old. They don't rush into things. They don't have whirlwind situations. They're not abusive. Like, none of that is within the realm of normal workable behavior. So if you're finding yourself having to explain the basics of adult behavior to another adult, then there's a problem. Like, that right there is deal breaker stuff, because you can't fix that. Like, if they somehow missed that chapter in development, that's more than, a few Sundays sitting on a pew. Like, you need, like, that's a lot. Just sort of like me going to church isn't going to help me to learn algebra. Right? Like, it's a skill that a person actually needs to take the time to practice and learn. They don't tend to care enough to learn. So with all of that said, I'm just going to play devil's advocate here and say, okay, so let's say you have a person and you're wanting to know, is this person, could they really change? Maybe could this time be different? The only way to really tell is time, and to see if their actions are consistent. So don't believe me. Like, pay attention to what you're seeing. And then that'll tell you exactly what's going on and if they are sorry. Because again, normal, balanced, emotionally mature people, if we make mistakes, how we would handle that would be to say, to be fully accountable for our behavior. So if I did something, I would say, you know what? And you shouldn't have to pull teeth to get the truth out of somebody. That's a deal breaker too. That shows a total lack of accountability and a lack of character. So if a person, you know, does something wrong, good character would say, hey, you know what? I did this. I'm really sorry. Like, this that this should have never happened. This is not okay that I acted this way. Here's how am I, here's how I'm going to rectify the situation. Here are my consistent actions that I'm going to be doing on a consistent basis in order to make amends to you. Versus a narcissist or an emotional manipulator that will demand that you forgive and forget, and that they demand that you get over it and never bring it up again, and that they demand that this all happens within like a week because they don't want the focus on them, because they don't want consequences to their actions. So that is that. Yeah, Sherry says it's not their behavior, it's their character. Amanda said, mine replaced me in an instant with a mutual friend who's 10 years older than him. And a lot of that was to most likely rub that in your face and to cause more pain and to cause more chaos and trauma and drama. Kirk asks, how do I emotionally disconnect from my narcissist when I work with her? If you can, I would strongly recommend looking for another job, because life's too short to go into that every single day. And I know that it's inconvenient. I know it's difficult. I know, but the stress, the ongoing stress it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. But how to emotionally disconnect in general is, I think when you start seeing the behavior for what it is, when you really see the behavior for what it is, like a lot of love becomes lost. Then you see that it's garbage and nonsense and smoke and mirrors and lies and chaos and foolishness. And you will get to the point, once you see it for what it is, where it is such a turnoff that you can't, you don't have to try to emotionally disconnect. It pretty much cuts that cord. The other concern, I should say, I would have if you're working with a narcissist would be, or an emotional manipulator, would be sabotage. Because they're drama. These people are drama with a capital D. And they need to feel smug and superior. They pot stir, they triangulate. There is no winning with them. It's like dealing with a child, a bratty, awful, horrid little child in an adult body. And their behavior is just really, really problematic. And that's why I would encourage you to just get out, because it's exhausting. So yep. Let's see. Stacy says, somehow I still get addicted to the excitement. I don't know why. So a lot of what you're talking about is what's called a trauma bond. And a trauma bond is, it's very much a chemical bond, but it's also this bond that's established between two people when you have somebody that takes you up to the highest high and then knocks you down to the lowest low and then takes you to the highest high again. So for example, if you've got, let's say it's Christmas time and you and your ex are together and it's this amazing, again, fairy tale kind of thing. Everything's going great and it's romantic and it's just wonderful. And then Christmas Eve, they start a fight, they break up. So you go from this is so amazing to boom, this is so incredibly painful. And then like the next morning they make up, and it's just this whirlwind of everything's okay again and everything's right with the world, and it's those highs and lows. Don't confuse that level of intensity with love, because it's not. It's not at all. It's a chemical high and low that people ride when you've got somebody that does that. And what's so sad is when a person is in a situation for a long time. There's another term that's called managing down of expectations. So the longer a person stays in that cycle of narcissistic abuse, that idealize, devalue, discard, the more they're in that, the more this bad behavior becomes normal. And so then a person's expectations of how they want to be treated slowly become eroded, just grinded down to where bad behavior really is the new normal. So now, whereas, okay, so like before, you would have been out the door had you caught them like cheating, lying, stealing, manipulating, addictions, all of this would have all been deal breaker stuff before. But if you stay, because again, not that this is your fault, but it's all of that manipulations, the charm, the false promises, the future faking, all of this, it's very, very convincing. And if we think that we're in a relationship with another normal person that has the capacity and sincere desire to change, then, it can be very confusing trying to figure out, well, are they truly, is this a normal relationship with the highs and lows, or is this an abusive relationship? And a lot of people, it's hard to think straight when you're in the thick of an abusive relationship and when you're in the thick of confusion. So when you're staying in it and this level of craziness has become your new normal, it's harder to get out, because it's sort of like if you've already stayed and they've already done this kind of stuff before, then the shock value of it's worn off. So now this just kind of becomes this idea of, well, this is just how we fight. She tries to choke me, strangle me, which is really what that is, strangling. She strangles me when she gets upset. So this is just how we fight. Or, he punches holes in walls, or, he calls me a bunch of names, or she, berates and belittles me in front of the children. Like, this is just how we fight. That all should be deal breaker stuff. It's not healthy stuff. And if it's not going to be deal breaker stuff for you now, it's really good. I highly recommend this. Getting honest with yourself, like getting real with yourself and asking yourself, then where is your line in the sand? At what point does it become problematic? Because when a person's in it, like I was saying, it's really hard for them to see things clearly. And of course, it's so frustrating for everybody else, because we're hearing this and they're saying these things. They're saying, you know what, this person, they're verbally abusive, or they're emotionally abusive, or they're gaslighting, or they're physically abusive. And, but if in their mind they feel like they can't or don't want to leave, things are going to continue to get worse, because there's no incentive for them to get better. Most people, all of us, we tend to only change when we experience enough pain from what we're doing. So, but they don't experience pain, because in their mind they have this blinding degree of entitlement that all of their behavior is justified, and worse, that it's generally all our fault. So when you've got a person that feels all of their bad behavior is not their responsibility and it's our fault, this is how people get hurt. This is how and why physically abusive people don't care. Like, they don't care. And this is how people end up getting hurt or killed in abusive relationships like this. And if the abusive person, no empathy, no remorse, in their mind they are 100% justified to do what they did. So, sorry, I'm sweating. It's really hot in here. Salon asks, has anyone gone through narcissistic abuse in high school? Yes, I did. That was one of my craziest relationships, was in high school. And he was an overt narcissist. It was a lot of the gaslighting. It was a lot of just psychological stuff. Thinly veiled threats, not so thinly veiled threats. And it was, I didn't realize at the time that it was an abusive relationship because he never hit me. He threatened to kill my brother. He threatened to kill my dog. He didn't let me break up with him. I was terrified that he was going to do something if I didn't stick around. So it was awful. I didn't realize that what he was doing was stalking or harassing or abusive until almost 20 years after I was out of that relationship, and I began working at a domestic violence shelter. And we had, obviously we had a lot of training we had to go through, and it was going through that training that I realized for the first time that I felt validated. Like, oh, yes, this was highly problematic. This was abusive. This was terrifying. And it was normal for me to feel terrified because I didn't feel validated during that. I felt like I was being drama. I mean, nobody believed me. And this was obviously before cell phones, before text. So it was all phone. And it was awful. It was just awful. So, and that's something too. So the whole like high school thing, a lot of people, not all of us, but a lot of people tend to really discount what kids go through, kids of all ages, whether it's elementary or middle or high school, and chalk it up to like, oh, boys will be boys, or oh, all beautiful girls are crazy, or oh, it's just teen love. They really minimize it. And it's important that we see abusive behavior for what it is, because it can happen at any age, and to act accordingly and to stop that accordingly. So, especially with a lot of the messages that kids are getting these days with, you've got movies like Twilight and, 50 Shades of Grey, which is the BDSM version of Twilight. I don't know if you guys knew that or not, but yeah. But that level of, Edward's character towards Bella, that level of intensity of, I love you so much, I'm going to just show up in your room and watch you sleep. I love you so much that I'm just going to follow you around everywhere you go. And so there's a lot of these kinds of messages that are given to kids and young adults as to like, this is what love is. It's very, very toxic, because that's not healthy at all. That's stalking, and it's an abusive relationship. So, and yes, and I would say bullying is a synonym for narcissistic abuse, because it's the same driving thing within a person. It's the same mindset of, it's me versus you. And that's the mindset of a narcissist. Versus a normal person. I love that. Postmodern. Yes, well said. It's intensity is not intimacy. Yes, intensity is not intimacy. There's an ocean of difference between the two. So with narcissists, there's these two mindsets. So you might hear a lot where people will say, okay, abusive people are really driven by power and control. And they are, but that can seem kind of nebulous. Like, what does that mean, power and control? It means domination is what that means. So it means it's that me versus you. It's the attitude of competition, that everybody is competition. Versus a normal person who is, their mindset is one of cooperation. So it's not a me versus you all the time. It's, it's teamwork. So if we're friends, if we're coworkers, if we're in a relationship, it's the mindset of, how can we resolve problems? How can we be solutions oriented? How can we get on the same page and make things work? Teamwork. but not with a narcissist. It's like, and the thing is, no matter what you do, it's always going to be them versus you, because it's just the way that their brain is wired. It's not personal. So you can't love them enough to where they'll stop that. So it's them. Okay. Hold on, Sherry. Let me answer your question because I think it's a great one. She says, why do you think that it is that somebody keeps choosing or is drawn to a narcissist? I had two in a row. The second one bashed the first one, saying he can't believe I was treated that way. I never would have suspected he was the same way. Apparently, he's always been that way, but I never saw it again. I don't trust my judgment. So that happened to me too. It wasn't quite back to back, but almost. And it's very unnerving, obviously, when that happens. Here's my theory on this. So, I don't know if you're familiar with kind of like the whole empty buckets theory, but basically, in a nutshell, it's that we're all born into this life with three empty buckets that we have to have filled. And it's the bucket, and this is kind of a spin on Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So you have the bucket of your physical needs, which includes, food, clothing, shelter, transportation, kind of basic physical needs. And at least, transportation is probably not a basic physical need, but for the sake of narcissistic abuse, we'll say that it is. Then you have the bucket of emotional needs, which is, love, understanding, appreciation, significance, importance, those kinds of needs. And then you have the bucket of security, which is really just the added reassurance that those other two buckets are going to continue to get filled on a predictable basis. Those buckets are originally filled by our primary caregiver, like our parents, when we're growing up. So if those buckets are not able to get filled for whatever reason, then we're starting off with a deficit. So let's say, and here's where it gets interesting, is those buckets could be not filled due to things. It might even be more of like the child's perception of things. So let me explain what I mean by that. So, obviously, if a person grows up with abuse or trauma of any kind, their bucket of stability is going to be diminished, as is their bucket probably of like emotional and physical is going to be starting off at a deficit. But let's say, for example, you've got a parent who is depressed, and so they're just not emotionally available, or a parent who's a workaholic and they're just not around. A child, even though like, they might have, food and shelter and transportation and clothes, and they're going to school, and everything doesn't really fit the thing of, or the idea of trauma or abuse. It's still neglect, even though it's maybe not even what we would consider to be neglect. A lot of people think of neglect as, oh, these kids are locked in the closet all day while the parent's at work, or they're just, getting fed graham crackers. But neglect can just be a parent not being there. And so if a child's not getting enough physical and emotional affection, this is the whole like failure to thrive, where this is such a big deal, this appropriate level of bonding with parents with small children, that, they've done studies in orphanages where babies will die if they don't get held enough. So it's a really big deal. So anyways, so if those buckets are at a deficit, as we get older, especially when we start dating, then what we're trying to do is we're trying to get our buckets filled at a subconscious level. And if we're coming across, so for example, if a person has the empty bucket of emotional needs, so they're feeling very unloved or very unimportant, and they come across a narcissist who's doing all of that love bombing, and they're making a person feel very loved and very important right away, it's man, that's like manna from heaven, right? That we're just drinking that up, because that's exactly what we need in order to get those needs met. And it's intoxicating, because it's exactly we're starved out for that. Our buckets can also be, so let's say a person has an absolutely fantastic childhood. There's no history of trauma. They grew up, this kind of Norman Rockwell, little house on the prairie kind of life. Let's say they get married and they're married for 40 years. And then they find themselves getting tangled up with problematic person after problematic person, like maybe even online dating scammers, or getting into cults, or narcissist after narcissist. Then it's, if they were married for 40 years, their spouse died, and now they have that empty bucket, they're going to have that same behavior where they're going to be so starved out that, and it's our brain, it's our brain, like it's our brain's way of trying to get our needs met. So even though we might feel that there are some red flags there, it's like our brain downshifts our thinking to where we're not thinking rationally, we're thinking in a rationalizing kind of way, but we're not aware of it. And this is one of the things, people say, don't make any major life change after like a death or a divorce or some sort of traumatic event. This is one of the reasons why, because we think that we're thinking clearly, but we're not. And then we start doing all kinds of stuff because we're in a scramble trying to put together our life. And this is, people invest in the crazy business ideas. They move far away. They just, go through kind of what we call like a midlife crisis, but it's, it's their way of coping. So, it can be helpful if, so yes, okay, so working hard to look for red flags, that's part of it. Knowing, having a good idea, especially if a person grows up in an abusive home, they're going to have a really skewed sense of what is appropriate behavior and what is problematic behavior. So just kind of knowing what red flags are is huge. For me, I used to teach red flags and stuff at the domestic violence shelter. But the red flags that I taught there were very much like overt signs of abuse. So, watch out for a person who's jealous or controlling, or how are they with, the waitress or the waiter, or how are they with children or pets, or these kinds of things. And, do they have a temper, and on and on. I was not aware of more of like the covert signs of abuse. I did not realize that Prince Charming was a red flag, or that a whirlwind romance was a red flag, or that kind of rushing intimacy, or the soulmate feeling of a soulmate connection off the bat with somebody, it was a potential red flag. And so, very much like you, I was in 2 different situations within a 5-year period of time, and I kept thinking, like, what am I missing? And I couldn't figure it out. I really felt like if anybody should know this stuff, it should be me. And so I couldn't figure it out. But, hindsight being what it is, I had those empty buckets of feeling very unloved and very unimportant. And I kept falling for these guys that were doing all of this love bombing. Now that I'm aware that those were the buckets that needed to get filled, then I could get busy filling them. And really, that's the solution for everybody, is to think about, okay, what empty buckets do you have, and then filling those up to where you're not vulnerable, where you've got a solid support system, and it's just like, and here's the thing, Sherry, which is so cool, is these relationships are such hell. They really, really are. They can be so incredibly eye-opening in a way that would not have happened any other way. And so for me, and I think again for a lot of people, these relationships are oftentimes, they're the fire that we can't ignore. But for a lot of people, we've had emotional manipulators in our life probably our whole life. So think back to other significant relationships you've had with friends or with coworkers or with exes. And think about how many of them have been high drama, have been exhausting, have been doing like the gaslighting, have been doing the triangulating and the pot stirring and all of it. And my guess is that you're probably going to find that there's quite a few people in your life that have done that, especially like significant relationships wise, because we tend to be drawn, if we're operating with that empty bucket, then we're drawn to people that are able to fill it fast. But kind of the big gift in all of this is when we can see kind of, what buckets need to be filled and kind of what we need to do. It really puts us on a whole path back to ourselves and back to finding our authentic self. And I think a lot of people, myself included, start realizing, that they don't know who they are after these relationships are over. And then they start thinking, they're like, you know what? I might not have ever known. And then they kind of start thinking back to, like, when did I have a good sense of myself? And if we grew up with a narcissist as a parent, if you had somebody, I heard a great quote the other day that said something like, the price of a relationship with a narcissist is self-annihilation. And it is. Because with a narcissist, it's that whole, like, there can be only one kind of dynamic where it's only them. It's win-lose. And if we grew up in that kind of environment where you've got a parent who's very overbearing, very micromanaging, very controlling, where they're continually grinding down that child to where that child doesn't have a solid sense of self, then they're going to grow up to be an adult that doesn't have a solid sense of self. And these kinds of relationships really bring all of that to the surface. And there's so much gold in this. I know that sounds really crazy to say, but there really is. There's so much gold that can be mined from the rubble of these relationships that we're all left with. There's a fantastic book. We just finished reading it for last month, Sherry, that I think you especially, or anybody, I know that there's a handful of therapists in here that are going through their own narcissistic abuse. Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic book. Life-changing book. Highly recommend it. I think you're going to find it absolutely fascinating. It's called Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving. It's by Pete Walker. The link, if you go to my website, thriveafterabuse.com, go to the book club, you'll see on there's a link to the book. There's a link to my notes. I took 24 pages of notes on that book. And it's like, you get it. You read that book and it's lights go on and you see your own behavior in a totally different light. And you see the behavior of other people in a totally different light. And I think it's helpful because it can really give a lot of clarity for clarity and closure, because you're like, oh my gosh, yes, this really describes, kind of that narcissistic personality grouping, because it's not, kind of emotional manipulators in general. You can see their behavior a lot more clearly, and it's so much easier to kind of put any doubt or guilt or questions to rest after you read that book. You really do realize this is them. Like, this is them. And I sincerely hope that they figure their stuff out, but because they're not living, it might seem like they don't have consequences for their actions and that they're getting away with everything, but they're not living a life full out either. Because they're just using people, and like, while they might get their buckets filled on a short-term basis by doing that, there is no, true like awareness or awakening or as Maslow would say, like transcendence that's possible when you're kind of at that scurrying level where you're just using and abusing people. Yes. Valinda said, it made me sad to see me in the fawn response. Yeah, it was very eye-opening. And then you kind of see our personality and our kind of defense mechanisms and everything in that too. It's just so eye-opening. I read the book. I finished it, what was it? I don't know, 10 days or so ago. And I went to a family, like a mini family reunion thing for a few days after that. And it was so interesting because after that book, here I am in this house with, a handful of family. And of course, family, that's hard to be around a bunch of family for any length of time, really, I think for most people. But seeing all of the family dynamics at play and not getting emotionally like invested in it, just kind of being more of an observer was really, really empowering, and it was really interesting. So I really feel like that book radically helped me in a very short period of time. And my guess would be that it has that impact on a lot of people because it's a great book. So yeah, people are talking about the book. Yeah, it really, really is great. Megan asks, where are your notes again, Dana? The notes are if you go to thriveafterabuse.com and then you go to book club, it'll take you to the support group. And then I have in there all of the different books, and my notes are all copied and pasted in there. So Wolf asks, do narcissists have those same empty buckets but fill them with or for different reasons, or fill them unhealthily? My take on it is, yeah, that's exactly what's going on here. So I really think that we all have these same three buckets, and you know, um, we all have different coping. We all have different strategies and techniques as to how to get them filled. So if you've got, in that book, that complex PTSD book, it goes more into this, but his kind of basic premise is that there's four main personality styles that develop from a traumatic home life. You have, and it's basically four different defense mechanisms. So you have fight, you have flight, you have freeze, and then you have fawn. And yes, shades of Joe, you nailed it. He says narcissism is a coping mechanism, very similar to codependency. So narcissism is the fight response. So you have, but these different defense mechanisms are kind of like the core of a person's personality, and then like the personality kind of grows on top of that. So for narcissists, it's their fight response is always on, which makes sense because for them it's always this me versus you mentality. They're always in fight mode. They always have to win. And the flight response is generally misdiagnosed as ADD, and it's a compulsive, like obsessive compulsive disorder is a very common personality disorder surrounding that, according to Pete Walker. And then people tend to stay really busy all the time, so like workaholics, or having a list of all of these things to do every day. It's just kind of this escapism is what it is. I think you could also make the argument that there's, different ways people escape, addiction of any kind, religion. My grandfather, perfect example of that. He was a narcissist and he was a minister, and he really didn't have an authentic self. Everything that he's ever really said was all quotes from the Bible. There was no real personality there. He was very, very, kind of drunk or high on religion. And that was his whole world. Even though like it was a staggering degree of hypocrisy, it didn't change him. It just gave him a better shield to hide behind, I guess. But so then you had fight, flight, freeze, which is kind of what deer do, right? So if they're like in danger, or rabbits, if they're in danger, they just stop. So like procrastination would be one. The fawn response is, I think of it as friend. So being overly friendly to people, people pleasing. So being a doormat, it's more on that codependency side of the spectrum, where in order to defend ourselves from real or perceived danger, we become overly friendly. And that's our way of like, kind of like pacifying the situation. Super, super, super interesting. The issue, I think too, one of the issues with that narcissism, that fight response, is that part of the brain that's activated is it's the what they call the reptilian brain. It's the amygdala. It's the basics of the brain. So you're really, when any of us are in that fight mode, you're dealing with a person who is going off of more like survival instincts, and their level of consciousness, like being in the moment, they are not there. Like they are focused on survival. So trying to be rational, you have to, it's your prefrontal cortex, that's the human part of the brain, to be rational with a person who's using the part of their brain that is survival, that why you're not getting through. This is why therapy is one of many reasons as to why it's not effective with narcissists, because their brain has like downshifted to where they're functioning at a very different level. And this is why it can be so confusing too, because that book, that complex PTSD book, is just so freaking brilliant, because he talks a lot about emotional flashbacks and triggers and all of this. With narcissists, it's this idea, because their fight mode's always on, that like just how we can get triggered by anything, right? That they do too. So, and Pete Walker talks about this. So you have like more obvious emotional flashbacks, like we talked about earlier, right? We were talking about like pepper spray and these kinds of things. So that can be a trigger for somebody, but so can a crying baby. If a person had a miscarriage or they lost the child, so can, if your ex used to drive a 1965 cherry red Camaro, then seeing that same kind of car can also be a trigger. Or hearing certain songs, or smelling certain foods, or being in a certain state or a certain city or a certain store. Anything can be a trigger, and they're all very individual. So what is a trigger for me is not most likely going to be a trigger for somebody else. That's one of the ways that complex PTSD is very different from regular, quote unquote, regular PTSD, because regular PTSD tends to be more from like an event. So like you have, it's kind of stereotypical. You have war, right? So a person's at war, they're experiencing all kinds of atrocities, loud noises, there's a lot of fear, their adrenaline is constantly going, they're in fight mode the whole time that they're there. They come back from war, now they can't reintegrate, their fight mode won't kick off, they're paranoid, they don't trust people, they want to isolate, they're easily startled. It's all of that fight mode. It's that defense mechanism's not turning off. That's what's going on. The complex PTSD, it tends to be more of a ongoing situational thing. So PTSD is going to be more from a specific thing. Complex PTSD, it's more complex. It's more a wider range of triggers, a wider range of things that are going on. Super, super interesting. Highly recommend that book. It's so fantastic. So yeah, somebody had asked, can a person have different types of the defense mechanisms? Yes. So Pete Walker in his book was saying that most people are like a main type and then a subtype. I kind of see myself in a lot of those. I would say my primary one is probably fawn, but when I get triggered, it very quickly jumps to fight. Like I get really hateful and angry quickly. And here's the thing too. So Pete Walker talks about these like emotional flashbacks, and a great way to tell that if you're having one is to ask yourself, like, pay attention to how you're feeling. If you're feeling like it's a disproportionate reaction to the current situation, then odds are it's an emotional flashback. So I tend to have these emotional flashbacks with going into church and being around therapists, which is terrible because I love therapists. I really do. I think they're like good. The vast majority of them are like really solid, good people. I just have had a lot of really, really bad experiences, and I've been very re-victimized and victimized by a lot, and I just I get really I don't like it. I don't like that I feel that way. It's really uncomfortable, and it's not the kind of person I want to be. And plus, I have a lot of friends that are therapists. Like, it's just, and it sucks because I feel my defenses go up around them, and I don't like that feeling. So Truth Seeker is saying oversleeping is freezing. You could make the argument, yeah, I would say freezing or flight. So, yeah, thank you for saying that, Elise. I know, and you're right, because yes, you're right. Like, you're totally right. Like, therapists can be victimized too, and yeah. Elise was saying, I've had therapists make me the problem with my ex-narc and wouldn't go to therapy. And it's, yeah, it's, I don't know. It's hard. But that book is really just so insightful. Because for me, I noticed I tend to do a lot of like the I don't know, flight or freeze, I guess, however you'd categorize it. Sleeping is like my one. I joke a lot that those are my primary defense mechanisms, is like sleeping and sarcasm. And that's the truth. Like, I could just sleep my life away when I'm stressed out or overwhelmed. And or I'll I joke about stuff when it hurts a lot of the time. Kat asks, what is standing my ground? Is it freeze or fight? It would be, if you're holding a healthy boundary, it would be fight. But within the healthy boundary, like healthy boundary realm of fight. So a healthy fight, and this is all in my book notes too, by the way, a healthy fight response would be, like being okay with saying no. So it would be, if somebody's really violating you, to just say, like, no, absolutely not. Like, that's a to have deal breakers, to have boundaries, to be able to walk away. So, and I've said this before, and so reading this book really like reinforced that, because my theory has really been for a long time that people that have extreme empty buckets or extreme codependency, which I think codependency is more of a, it's the result of empty buckets. Because, like I said, a person could not have any issues with codependency, but then have an empty bucket later on in life and then still have all of the same issues. But anyways, so if a person has an extreme low bucket or extreme codependency, I fully believe that if it's not properly addressed and handled, it can lead to death. Either it's a slow death through addiction, or it's suicide, or it's them getting killed by somebody. Because if we don't have a healthy boundary, if we don't have deal breaker behavior, and if we aren't able to say no, and if we're continuing to put ourselves in harm's way because we're thinking that we can save somebody else, then that's not going to end well. Like we have got to be able to realize that we have value, that we are important, and that it's healthy and normal to be able to say, no, these are my boundaries. This is when, I've got to walk away from a situation. But okay, so with that said, I don't want to be like, the big wet blanket over here, but with that said, once we bring this to awareness, it's like I said, it's amazing. Like once you start seeing it, you're like, oh, okay, I am starting to get this. Like, okay, this is what boundaries are, and this is, kind of what's healthy for me, and this is what's unhealthy, and you just start learning about all of this. Then it really starts making sense, and you can start making changes like now, like starting now. So yeah, so Valenta, here's my take on that too, because I think a lot of people do that. Valenta was saying, I'm starting to clean and throw out stuff because I'm very attached to people and things, so I'm practicing to detach. Yeah, and I think that's great. So Pete Walker talks about the 4 different defense mechanisms. I personally think that you could make the argument that there's like at least 3 more. So I mentioned funny being one, because you again, like you look at, like I was saying, like sarcasm is one of my defense mechanisms. I think there's a lot of comedians out there that use humor to deal with uncomfortable situations, especially their childhood. That's how they learn to survive. You've got being funny, you've got fortressing, and you've got what I call foraging. So the kind of stuff that you're talking about, I think, again, a lot of people do. It's that hoarding behavior. So you look at animals, when there's a storm that's coming, you've got, let's say, a squirrel, right? They know when winter's coming, they know when a storm's coming, that they're going to get out there, they're going to start gathering acorns and provisions, and then they're going to bring them back to their little house, right? So that they can weather the storm. People do the same thing. I know I do the same thing. I have the weirdest thing with food, and I've had this probably like going on 10 years now, where I've had people even comment on this where they're like, what are you doing? And because it doesn't make sense. I will buy a lot of food at the grocery store, and especially canned food or frozen food. A lot. I mean, it's just me. Like I will buy a lot of food and then either not eat it or continue to buy it. Now it's a lot. I've gotten a lot better at that since I don't have as big of a kitchen and as big of a pantry as I used to have. But I think it was very much that kind of what you're describing. It was like bringing things in to make myself feel more comfortable. I see this too with a lot of like narcissists. I think that's very much like a fear-driven thing, like preppers, survivalists. There's quite a few narcissists that I know that are like way into that are very fear-based. I mean, they've got cameras on the outside of their house. They've got for no reason. They've got they're storing food. They've got an underground bunker. It's very much this kind of foraging, and then also the fortressing, which you could make the argument like that a lot of that behavior is fortressing and or having boundaries that are really, really, really like high and tight, to where you're so inflexible that you keep everybody out, or a person's isolating so much that they just, which is also very normal. It's part of that whole CPTSD thing, but where they're wanting to keep people out because they don't want to get hurt. So yeah, Lisa says, I used to be bulimic. Speaking of bringing things in. Yes, I think Yes, 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 yes. So I agree. I think that eating disorders, when you start seeing like the ripple effects of this and you realize that every single thing that us human beings do is is to meet a need or it's to cope with a need not getting met. Everything. Everything. So it's really interesting to think of our behavior that way. This is why like diets don't work. This is why, you know, like I mean, I look back on my life and I'm like, oh my God, everything makes so much more sense. All of these different, time management things I was going to, and I was so disorganized and so busy all the time, and all of this, in all of those books I read, all of those classes I took, all of everything that I was doing wasn't helping because I was trying to address that defense mechanism from the top down when I needed to address it from the bottom up. Because that behavior was my way of was my way of coping and was my defense mechanism. So, and there's kind of that old adage too that addictions in general tend to run in threes. And I think you could broaden that to like any type of problematic behavior tends to run in threes because it's our way of coping. And so, like you go to Las Vegas and you see people there, you've got a lot of the time, like, the addiction of drinking, the addiction of gambling, the addiction of, casual sex, that's like putting it nicely, promiscuous sex, drugs, all kinds of this, it's all coping. It's all coping. So it's interesting when you really start kind of thinking about all of that and seeing really thinking about your behavior, like why are you doing what you're doing? What need is this meeting for you? And how could you meet that need in another way? And it takes some practice because this stuff it's all like subconscious stuff. I mean, but what's cool is like once you bring that awareness to it and you realize, oh my gosh, like this is why I'm doing this, then you can start slowing things down because you're seeing it clearly because you have that awareness of it to where you can now, start changing your behavior. But yeah, it's really interesting stuff. Hey, I just realized Martine is here. Martine, how the heck are you, my friend? I have not seen you in forever. I was starting to really get worried about you. Valenta asks real quick, how do you improve time management? Well, I think for a lot of it is, for me, it's doing less. Because I would, and everybody's different with time management kind of stuff, but I was confusing activity with productivity. So it was just like this perpetual scramble. So now I set a timer. That's one thing I do. I try to do less. I don't make to-do lists that are 20 things long. I make a to-do list with like maybe 3 things on it for the day. And then I set a timer, which helps keep me on track. That's worked wonders. And so with like, and then other tasks like making videos and these kinds of things, what I try to do is I try to do like tasks all at once. So I'll try to sit down and make a handful of videos all at once and then edit them all at once and then do that. So I guess just kind of like, chunking things together and then setting a timer really helps me. So Sienna asks, so is full healing plausible, Dana? Or does the journey never end? Let me see. I think there's more to your question. And that's a fantastic question, by the way. Um, I guess what's tripping me up is the word healing. Because I think you could look at that in a couple different ways. Is true healing possible? Yes. Yes, it is. Possibly not in the way that most people think, if that makes sense. So I think a lot of people, when they get out of a relationship like this, they are thinking about healing in terms of, will I be able to actually function in life again? And will I get to the place where I'm not having nightmares or night terrors or paranoid or feeling hypervigilant? Will I get to the place where I can actually function? And the answer to that is yes. I fully believe that that's available for everybody. That's kind of the first wave of healing. Then the second wave has to do a lot with like recognizing our empty buckets and kind of figuring out what's going on, especially if we've had a pattern of these people in our lives. Like it's really worth taking some time to figure out kind of what empty buckets do you think you might have, and then how can you go about filling them. And then the part third wave to that healing, I think, is, and it's part of the filling of empty buckets. That sounds funny. It sounds like that. What was it? That Seinfeld, the airing of the grievances, the filling of the buckets, the filling of the buckets, where like you start to really get to know yourself, and that's the gift in this. And so that's, but like there is no finish line, I guess, with that. And that's not a bad thing. It might feel kind of overwhelming now, but it really is not a bad thing. It's because who you are is going to continue to evolve. It's going to continue to grow and change. And it's a cool thing when you just get so locked on to who you are and what you're about and what your goals are and your hopes and your dreams and your fears, and you're just unapologetically you. That's when, man, like that's it. Like that's what we're here for. That it's just awesome stuff. And that's the gift in all of this. And here's the thing. So here's my take on it. You have kind of like three main groups of people, right? So you have like very like, I don't know, I won't say toxic, deeply unconscious people like narcissists. And I would say even like if we're struggling with codependent, when we're acting in a way that's at a very subconscious level, right? Because we're kind of irrational, right? So you've kind of got the like irrational people. Then you have quote unquote normal people. And normal people don't tend to change a whole lot. They just kind of are chugging along through life. And a lot of them, they either are content or they have a somewhat mediocre life. Things aren't too good, they're not too bad. They're just chugging along. They don't have a lot of goals. They might not feel like they have a purpose in life. They're just chugging along. What brings people to that next level is really when you go through something that's this traumatic, that breaks down every single thing about you, then you can rebuild. And when you start rebuilding your life around the core of who you really are, not who your parents want you to be, not who your friends think you should be, not who your religion tells you who you should be, not who society tells you should be, or the movies or anybody else, who you, like you knowing yourself well enough that you are unapologetically you, then that's kind of the whole Maslow's thing about like transcendence, and you're just living a life where you're just like tapped in and tuned in, turned on, and you're living your life full out. And that's awesome, but that doesn't tend to happen to like quote unquote normal people, because they don't ever experience that much pain to where they're completely broken down. Like I really do believe that a person has to be completely broken down like this in order to rebuild. There's just no other way. It's sort of like the bridges are burned. There is no choice. Like you either sink or you swim. And that's what these relationships will do to a person at the end of them. And it's incredibly hard, and believe me, there's many days where a person's like, you know what, like I am just doing good. Somebody put it really great the other day. They said that the support group and the live streams really help them to keep their lips above the waterline. And that's how it feels oftentimes, is that you're treading water and you're fighting the fight. But a lot of good can really come from this. And I always encourage people to get a mantra. And mine for a long time was, the best revenge is a good life. And I told myself that over and over and over again, because it helped me to refocus on the direction that I wanted to head. And it gave me power and control back over my life. So that's kind of a long answer. And you also asked about if we would always have this love addiction. No, I don't think so. Because if you can fill that bucket with love, then you're not going to feel so starved out. So it's finding ways that you can feel loved in a healthy way. Spending time with friends, spending time with animals, volunteering, doing a lot of self-talk works wonders. Meetup.com, I'm a huge fan of that. I think a lot of people, where they go wrong, myself included, is they think to themselves, I'm really sad or lonely, so I should date. And that's a terrible, terrible mindset to go into dating with, because dating's hard enough when you're feeling good about yourself and your life. It's really hard. And you're not going to be thinking clearly if you're lonely. So, getting those social supports around you and feeling loved on a regular basis in a healthy way will stop that love addiction. And then when you do find a healthy person, the healthy person in you is going to acknowledge that in them. And because you've now built a whole life that you love, that's authentically you. And once you do that, you're going to be attracted to somebody that's done the same thing for themselves. Now you've got two whole people that are coming together to build a relationship, instead of two halves coming together in hopes of becoming whole. Because that's what you have when you have a narcissist and a codependent, is you have two people that have developed these personality styles as coping mechanisms. They haven't formed an authentic self. And that's why there's this parasitic relationship on the side of the narcissist. And there's this so they're overtaking where we are overgiving. And the whole goal is the same, which is to try to get these buckets filled. But it doesn't work, because, other people, only we can fill our buckets. So, let's see here. Oh my gosh. Kevin says, my abuser is telling underage girls to pretend that they're interested in me to check if I'm a pedophile. That is really disturbing. I'm sorry about that. Hopefully it's a pretty easy thing to do, where you can just say, no, I'm not interested in children. I like adults. So, let me scroll up here. True Love says, I want to date and have dated, but I don't feel emotionally available for the other person. I feel very vulnerable still. I'm still not completely over that addiction to the narcissist bad boy types. Well, I definitely would say, if you're still feeling vulnerable, to not date, because You're going to be you're going to be attracting problematic people if you're vulnerable. And if you're feeling vulnerable, you're going to have a hard time walking away. So, and it's important that when we're dating that we are able to have deal breaker stuff, and that you are able to walk away. So, it's kind of like getting yourself to a healthy place where you have good boundaries, and this takes time and this takes practice. And this is another reason, again, like meetup.com is so great for this, because you're meeting, it's a relatively safe way to meet strangers and to practice boundaries, to practice finding hobbies and things that you enjoy, and in a safe way. And you can get out there and kind of rediscover yourself and practice a lot of this stuff. So here's the thing. Okay, if you're still not completely over that addiction to the narcissist bad boy, ask yourself, what is it about them that you find attractive? Because that'll give you a clue as to which empty buckets which needs of yours that they're meeting. And once you start meeting those needs, then your addiction to that is going to go away. So, is it the love bombing? Is it the rushing intimacy? Is it the kind of the whirlwind situation? Kind of what's driving that? Is it insecurity? Is it, only you have that answer. But I think once you really start to kind of turn inward and start asking yourself about what is the attraction there, then you're going to have a better chance of slowing that down and meeting that need in a better way. So, Lisa says, I was loving ukulele and going to a ukulele meetup when he came into my life. So, yes. So having a life doing things that we love, having that kind of that authenticity, and you're having hobbies, which is super cute that you play the ukulele, by the way. I have a friend that plays, and it's just, I get the biggest kick out of that. But that you're doing things that you love, and you're building this life that you love. We can still have empty buckets, and not be aware of that. So it really, I really do think that it helps people to consciously think about, where are your empty buckets? And once you're able to identify that, then my guess is you're going to be less likely to fall into these kinds of relationships or with these kinds of people. And if you do happen to have this happen again, because this stuff, it takes practice, you're going to most likely hop out of that situation a lot sooner than later. So, Lisa says, but then I stopped, but the ukulele is sitting in my kitchen waiting for me. Lisa, I would love nothing more than if you were to play a ukulele song, if you were so inclined to film it and then put it in the support group. I think that would bring a smile to so many people. And maybe that would kind of push you out of your comfort zone in a safe enough way that you could start playing again. So I'm just throwing that challenge out there. Okay, you're going to work on it. Okay, good. Let's see. Sherry says, okay, how about this, Lisa? I'm gonna add more of a challenge to the challenge. So my birthday is Sunday. I will be 39 forever from here on out. Like, I will be 39 forever. But no, for real, I will be 39. So I would think, I would love if you are so inclined to sing me, how about could I talk you into singing me happy birthday on the ukulele? Like, that would be the most awesome birthday gift ever. I'm just saying. So, okay, Sherry asks, what did you do to fill your buckets from love bombing? I think that might be my empty bucket. Yet it's not empty. I'm fairly independent and able to do self care. It's just nice to share life with someone. I started joining a lot of meetups and spending time with people. I was the exact same way, like the exact same way. I had been fiercely independent for probably my whole life, but really since I had gotten married, because my ex-husband, he was military and we were moving around a lot, and kind of loneliness became my new way of life because we were moving to a different state every 18 to 24 months and I didn't know anybody and neither did he. But he was also always deploying. So I was home a lot and it was, you just dealt with it because that was military life. And I thought I had gotten used to it. I didn't realize how empty that bucket was for me until I got a divorce and was in a state that I didn't know anybody in and was incredibly overwhelmed. And then I crashed into Jack and then later, a few years later into Steve. And so yeah, what really helped, joining meetups and then like just the concept of empty buckets. When I first heard of that, somebody had mentioned that in another support group, I don't know, almost 2 years ago. And that was like the missing piece of the puzzle for me. The way that they had said that, it just made so much click because I, I just hadn't ever thought of it that way. And that was exactly what was going on and exactly what I needed to work on. Yes, great differentiation. She says, I'm very lonely, but I'm okay being alone. I was the same way. Like, I'd rather be alone than with the wrong person because I've been with the wrong people before, and there is no greater sense of loneliness than when you're with the wrong person. So, but I think, again, like a lot of this is just having this, bringing this to our awareness. So now that okay, like I really would like to meet somebody. I'm feeling lonely. It would be nice. It would be not sure. Like it'd be nice to meet somebody super awesome and have this amazing relationship. But so this is a potential vulnerability of mine right now. And again, like just like our boundaries change, just like who we are changes, our vulnerabilities change too. So a person's vulnerable, and because we're all human, we all have vulnerabilities. So a person might be vulnerable. They might start off in life feeling vulnerable because they grew up in a house with that they were abused, or maybe that they have an absent parent, that their dad wasn't around, or that their mom wasn't around, or that their parent was an addict or an alcoholic or a workaholic or mentally ill or depressed, or something was going on that they didn't bond effectively. Or maybe they moved around a lot. And so now they really crave stability, which can be a vulnerability, right? Or let's say a person, maybe they gain a lot of weight, or they lose a lot of weight, or they have a birthday that, ends in a 5 or a 0. Those can be really hard birthdays for a lot of people. Or they're a certain age and maybe they have kids, they're a single parent. Or maybe they're a certain age and they don't have kids. And now they're in this scramble to meet somebody to have kids with. So, or maybe they're a widow, or maybe they just won the lottery. Like that can be a vulnerability. So like there's lots of different things that can make a person vulnerable. It's important that we just continue to kind of like check in on ourselves and figure out how we're feeling. And I think to look at the results that we're getting in our life, that's a great way to tell like what's really going on. I know for me, I look around, it's like there are times where I'm like, did like, it was like a group of wild monkeys that live in my house. Like, how does my house get trashed? It's just me. Like, there is nobody else for me to blame this on. Or my car. Like, there are times where I'll get in my car and I swear in my mind my car is cleaned out, but I will get in my car and it is ridiculous. And or my office is the same way, my desk. And for me, that's a good sign that I'm trying to do too much, that I'm really overwhelmed, and that I need to slow down and do less. So, kind of paying attention to the results that you're getting in your life, because that's really indicative of the thought process that's driving those results. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier with like the top down approach versus the bottom up. So, my former top down approach would have been to focus on trying more to get more organized, but it wasn't necessarily a lack of organization that was the issue. It was the scramble, the anxiety, the scrambled thinking that was the issue. And that was coming from stress and overwhelm and not setting boundaries is what that was coming from. So until I got that piece into place, like once you get that piece into place, everything else falls into place. Like your life will start to work once you get your boundaries and your, you know, like figuring out who you are and you're okay with that. Yeah. Sherry says, it's not right or fair to date anyone for a long time if I have trust issues. Filling the void would be detrimental to both parties, and it just sucks. It does. And I felt the same. I think a lot of us feel the exact same way. So, you know, it's hard. It's hard. I think there's a lot of anger, a lot of righteous anger that comes from that. Feeling like, you know what? Feeling like I feel like damaged goods. I feel like I am going to be profoundly, horribly broken forever. And that is an awful feeling. And then kind of at the same time hoping that it'll, like, one day you'll wake up and that things will be better. But healing doesn't happen overnight. Like, there is no real finish line like that. It's a gradual process. It's kind of like, if you fall down really hard and you scrape your knee really hard, right? Like, it's messed up. Every single day you're like, this, my knee hurts, it looks gnarly, it's red, it's inflamed, it's pain, it's, there's pus, it's scabbing over, I mean, all of these things. And we're looking at that and we're like, when is my knee going to be normal? When is my knee going to be normal? But the reality is all of that is healing, but you don't see it until, like, you see it. But if you can see that all of those things, all of the pain, the inflammation, the swelling, the redness, the scabbing, the pus, all of that is part of healing. And to see these feelings that we're having as it's part of it, and to try to not resist it, just realize this is how we heal emotionally. So you can so heal from this. You really, really can. And your life can be even better than it was before. For real. Like, I'm not just saying that. I sincerely, sincerely mean that. And it's just this, like, ever unfolding, amazing journey that you're on. Like, you're on it now, that you're on, where you start realizing, okay, who am I and what do I like? And here's the thing with the whole trust issues, because that's part of that fight or flight mechanism. So when we go through something traumatic, it's very normal to feel distrusting of other people, to feel paranoid and uncomfortable, and just like hypervigilant. That's part of that fight response. That's the adrenaline. That's all of these stress hormones going through our body, preparing us to get out of harm's way. Those feelings do tend to settle down in time. And, a lot of it is your brain is trying to process what happened. what happened that you were put in danger, and more importantly, what your brain needs, like what lessons your brain needs to learn from this so it can keep you out of harm's way in the future. So, like, and this is what's so hard. I think this is one of the reasons too people tend to go around this mountain over and over again, is that we tend to link up the wrong lessons with this. So, for example, a lot of people, myself included, will link up what we think might be the cause of our pain, especially if it's more covert abuse. Because if we're not aware, if we don't identify that as abusive or even problematic, because we all have this idea of what abuse is like. And for most people, that involves a male abuser and a female victim, and really horrible physical abuse to where the female abuser has, the female victim has bruises on her face. And so anything outside of that tends to fly over the radar of most people as being an abusive relationship or being problematic. And so if we're not identifying what we're experiencing as, oh, this is triangulation, this is gaslighting, this is what was going on, when we're so lost in that fog of confusion where we're not sure what we experienced or if we're the problem or if they're the problem or any of that, we tend to link up the wrong cause and effect. And so we might tell ourselves something like, oh, well, I'm never going to date a Latin man again, or I'm never going to date a redhead again, or I'm never going to date an accountant again, or, I don't know, a Catholic guy or a Buddhist or, a Muslim or kind of, what have you again. And our brain is missing what the problem really was. It wasn't that that person was Catholic or Latin or redhead or an accountant. It was that they had problematic behavior, that was the problem. And so once we're able to accurately identify, this is the problem, this behavior that I did not see coming, and my vulnerabilities that I was not aware of, that they were able to exploit, because that's how they get into our lives and stay in our lives. Once you know what's going on, it's really going to help to calm your brain down, to calm that fight response down, because you're able to more accurately pinpoint what's going on. And so once you can kind of prove to yourself that you can keep yourself safe and that this shouldn't happen again, it's going to settle down. Same thing, like, again, with more, regular PTSD. If somebody were to experience a home invasion, it would be very normal for them to feel the exact same way, very distrusting. They want to isolate. They're feeling hypervigilant. They're going to these great lengths to avoid other people. They're becoming very jumpy. So once they start doing things to make themselves feel better, like maybe, sleeping with a can of bear mace next to their bed, or getting a home security system installed, or getting a dog, or getting floodlights installed outside of their house, these things. Once they start doing these things, their brain's going to calm down because they realize, okay, they're taking action now to keep themselves safe. So give yourself time. This is very, very, everything that you're experiencing is very, very normal. And the right person is going to come along at the right time. So seriously, like, have faith in that. The universe, God, whatever you want to call it, forces that be, they really are. I fully, fully believe, and I know this might sound crazy, I really do believe that everything is working towards our highest and greatest good at all times. And I know that that's a hard pill to swallow when we've gone through an abusive relationship. But like I said before, there's a lot of gold that can come out of this. And, all growth, it comes with pain. That's kind of the blessing and the curse in this, is that there's tremendous amounts of personal growth, but there's tremendous amounts of pain that we can't escape. But the good thing is, you guys, you're not alone, and there's so many people out there that are going through this, and it's sort of like the club that nobody wants to join, but they're glad that there are so many other members. And yeah, good. I'm glad. Yep, exactly, Lisa. Lisa says, LOL. I told myself I was never going to date a talkative guy again or a guy that has a shirt off in his online profile. And then I chose a quiet guy with his shirt on, and then bam, same stuff. Yep. Because until we can spot the behavior, and that takes time, right? Because everybody's on their best behavior for at least the good 30 days, kind of like a job interview. Dating is a lot like a job interview. So, realizing that, like, that you're seeing as good as it's going to get, and at the beginning. And that's why it's so important to go slow and realize that it's important to see how is a person when they're sick or when they're stressed or on a day-to-day basis or with their friends or family and in other situations, and to see that fuller picture, and to just you don't have to be like hyper vigilant about seeing red flags, but to see them when they surface, and then to act accordingly, and to have a solid sense of deal breakers and deal makers. Because a person could be like not a narcissist, but they still might not be right for you. So this kind of goes back to that whole like authentic self thing. So, if you're really musical, like it sounds like Lisa is, if that's a big thing for her, then she needs to find somebody that is supportive of that. And maybe even ideally that's musical as well. Maybe not, I don't know. But kind of whatever makes you to find somebody that not only like respects that, but empowers that and helps you grow. And that, of course, you would do the same for them. So Safi says, I see red flags all the time and I ignore them. So, and that's, it's good that you are aware of that. That's half the battle, is just awareness of things. And maybe start journaling. Why do you think that you're ignoring them? Because what you're talking about, hold on a second real quick, is when we ignore red flags, there's a term, it's called cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance is when we have two conflicting thoughts about the same thing at the same time. And so if you, for example, if you're dating a person, right, you're on the second date with a person, you really want this relationship to work, then if you really want the relationship to work, then, and you encounter deal breaker behavior, well, that's conflicting, right? So there's one thought that says, I really want the relationship to work. The other thought is, I really need to end the relationship. You're going to have this mental distress about what to do. And the way that we resolve this mental distress when we have it, and we all have it, is by getting our thought to line up with the action that we're taking. So if the action that we're taking is that we're going to stay in the relationship, then in order to do that, we have to have our thought line up with that. For that thought to line up, we have to generally justify our action or justify our thought. So if your action is to stay in the relationship, but your thought is that you're experiencing a red flag, the justification might be something like, oh, well, nobody's perfect, or, okay, yeah, he told a lie, but it's not that big of a lie, or, yeah, he did yell, or she yelled during our date, she yelled at me, but, maybe she had a bad day at work. So these are the kinds of ways that people justify problematic behavior to themselves when they want to stay in a relationship, but the reason they want, or stay doing anything. So, but this goes back to the reason that we're justifying things to ourselves is because that relationship is meeting a need, because it's filling an empty bucket. So this is why it's so important, because a lot of this stuff is at a subconscious level. If we can approach dating with a more, a full bucket, to where we're not glossing over red flags, where we have an attitude of abundance, because it's hard to have an attitude of abundance when you have a need that needs to get met. So when you have a need that needs to get met, we all have this. You have like this attitude of scarcity, right? So, like, you're not going to be choosy if you have an attitude of scarcity. But it's really important that if you're dating, you've got to be choosy, or else you're going to wind up with just random people in your life that may or may not be a good fit for you. So it's worth examining kind of what empty buckets do you have? What kind of stuff are you glossing over? Why do you think that you're glossing over it? What can you do to fill up those buckets? And, move forward. Yeah, Martine says, the thing is, really, no one is perfect, so it gets confusing. Totally. I agree completely. And it is hard. That's why it's so helpful. I think two things really help with this. Having a set idea of deal breaker behavior ahead of time. So you're not trying to figure this out when you're already like emotionally invested in a situation. So having an idea of what deal breaker behavior is for you. So I'd mentioned this before in this other video that I recently did. My 4 deal breakers: abuse of any kind, addiction of any kind, abuse, addiction, adultery, or cheating, and attitude. So if they have a really crummy attitude, if they're consistently negative, if they're, just like that kind of stuff, that's all deal breaker stuff for me. But that's like ground zero, right? So from there, like, I need to build on that, so to figure out like what is deal maker stuff. And then that's where it gets to be like more of an individual thing, to kind of figure out like what are you, who are you, and like what is a thing for you. So like for me, I love to be outside. I love camping. I love, I love really great conversation. So, I probably would not be a good match with somebody who liked to watch a lot of TV. Doesn't make them bad or wrong. It just means that I don't know if that would really be like the best fit. And that's where it does get hard, when you meet somebody and you kind of think, okay, like, what am I willing to negotiate on, and what am I not? But I think what I was saying, that there's 2 things with that. So deal breakers is one. The second one is paying attention to how you feel. So when you're trying to navigate those waters of, well, yeah, like, nobody is perfect. So how do I know? Like, how do I know, whether to stay or go? A lot of it has to do with how you feel. So if overall this relationship is, if you look at it on a scale of like 0 to 10, 10 being like you're empowered, you feel jazzed, you feel alive, you feel juiced, like this is a good thing. 5 would be like lukewarm. 0 would be ice cold. To continue to check in with yourself on like a regular basis, like, where are you on that emotional scale with everything? And so then when you're dating somebody, to shoot for those people that are like 9s or 10s. And you could talk me into going down to like an 8 on that, but really no less than that. 8, 9, 10 is really, that's the kind of the zone that you want to be in. And if you're honest with yourself, you really know. So, and again, a lot of that stuff just takes practice. Marie says, I've never had a boyfriend that hasn't lied to me, so I'm perplexed about this. I just thought all men lie. Yes, no, not all men lie. I mean, again, it's the behavior, it's not the gender. Right? It's the behavior, it's not the profession. It's the behavior, it's not the astrological sign. So seeing that, the problem with, with lying is lying. So, but there's lots of really great men and women, people out there, but we're not going to find them if we aren't okay with walking away from something that's not right for us. So, okay, Lisa asked a question here. Let me see. Um, Sherry says, Lisa, tag me when you play the ukulele, please. I can't miss that. I agree. I really hope that Lisa ends up doing that. Lisa says, my problem is that I wanted him to play the ukulele too. I think that's the controlling part of me. I don't know, but it would have been perfect. So, yeah, I mean, and I guess like, if that's a big thing for you, like how big of a deal is it that somebody plays the ukulele? Yes, it would be perfect, but does it need to be perfect, or can it be like good enough? Can you still have a relationship with somebody and it feel like an 8 or a 9 or a 10 and them not play the ukulele? Now maybe the answer is no. I don't know. I mean, this is where it gets to be like a very individual thing. So Josh says, no ukulele. It's a deal breaker for me. That's funny. Let's see. Lisa says, I just wanted to have fun together. He said he would go to tango lessons with me too, but then never did. And so that's, we call a lot of that kind of stuff, it's future faking. So it's basically telling somebody everything that they want to hear. It's giving them this idea that you could have, that they could have like this perfect future with them. And emotional manipulators they're notorious for that. So they'll sell you on this idea of, a wedding, or, remodeling a house, or tango lessons, or travel, or all of these things. And it's all just talk. I mean, they're not in reality. So, yeah, I missed what David said, but Lauren said, David, you don't need proof. If it's a problem for you, then run. And I agree completely. So, yeah, and other people don't need to agree with you. Like, they don't get to vote. Your life is not a democracy. Your partner, if you're experiencing behavior that's deal breaker stuff to you, then that's enough. Like, that's all you need. They don't need to understand. You don't need to justify it. You don't need, I heard a great acronym the other day called JADE. And it stands for justify, argue, defend, or explain. Like, you don't need to do any of those things. You just need to set a boundary and then take action on it. So, let's see. Let me scroll up. Yeah, Randy was saying she didn't see the red flags until she was already so invested. And that's most of us, and that's why we stay. And I mean, there's just like, there's so many layers to it, right? So like, many of us don't realize that those red flags are necessarily red flags, or that they're problematic red flags, Because we might think to ourselves, well, okay, yeah, he just upped and left his wife and then started dating me, but like I've had other friends that have done that and it turned out fine. So sometimes it can be hard to kind of tell, is this really that big of a deal, or is this a normal, like a normal red flag, or what? But and it's hard to like it's hard to walk away when we're emotionally invested in something. Yeah, as Salon says, I pray for the day to come where I can talk freely like Dana about narcissists without triggering myself. It will happen. It will happen. I will say, just for all transparency's sake, that when I first started this channel, I did not know really anything about YouTube, and I didn't watch a lot of YouTube, and I didn't really think anybody was going to be watching my videos. Like, I started putting videos out there with the hopes that you know it, like some people might see them and it might reach some people. I had no idea, none, that it was going to be to this level. So once I realized people were watching, I was emotionally, this has been beyond a roller coaster for me, because I was not prepared to explain this to my family, to explain a lot I mean they knew what I went through, but to explain why I'm doing this, to realize that there's probably family members of mine that listen to my live streams and that I talk openly about my life, and realizing that that's probably going to cause issues at some point in time. And I did feel incredibly triggered for a while, but I think it was, and I think this is the benefit of the support group too, is when you're open about stuff, it's like the benefit of it outweighs the trigger of it. Like it helps a person kind of push through. And so now it's funny, like we all carry this stuff around with us, and there's all this like shame and guilt and all of these emotions. But man, like when you just put it out there, there's such a tremendous amount of freedom that comes from just owning your stuff and being like, yeah, this is my life, and good, bad, and different. Like, this is my life. you know. Thanks, Doug. Doug is watching the time for me here. Marie says, Dana, how long do you think it takes to heal with good trauma therapy? That's a great question. I think it is a very individual process. Let's see. Well, I guess it depends too, kind of like what stage of healing. The whole, a lot of like the complex PTSD stuff that tends to really resolve, like fully resolve itself for most people within about 18 months. For me, I would say that it was, I mean, it was still there. It was still to some degree, but not to like a crippling degree. At about 18 to 24 months, it was still somewhat there, but it was livable. I mean, I could leave the house. I was doing things, and I felt like I was losing my mind. I had never heard of complex PTSD before. I did not know why I was feeling like that. That was really unnerving. So my guess would be, for people that are in support groups, my guess would be that their healing happens a lot more rapidly, because they're not lost in that confusion of wondering, is it me, is it them, and what's wrong with me, and am I crazy, and you know like, because you have other people that are just flat out tell you, like, this is what's going on, and this is what a hoover is, and a flying monkey, and complex PTSD, and they'll keep you on track 24 hours a day. That's huge. I probably would have healed a lot faster had I had that early on. And I think too, probably another one of the biggest things that really helped was making the decision, first of all, to never go back. Like, when I found out what was really going on with Jack, to me it was, I'd kind of like mentally toyed around a little bit with maybe, just briefly, because thankfully I found out so much stuff right away that there was no way I could go back. I mean, the shock of it all was way too much. So going no contact is huge. And then making the decision that this is not going to ruin my life. Like, taking that off of the table as a possibility and just realizing, okay, I'm not going to give him that. So now I need to figure out how to go about rebuilding. And, then I got tangled up with Steve a few years later, and that was it was really devastating, because all of that hard work that I had done with healing from Jack and everything, it really crumbled me down even further. I mean, I thought I lost everything before. I had no idea what was in store. I fully lost everything with Steve. I mean, everything. And but yeah, I guess just kind of like doubling up on that conviction of, I'm not going to let this destroy my life. And then I guess getting so angry about it, it was the decision of, not only am I not going to let this destroy my life, but I am going to use this for my highest and greatest good. I'm going to make this work for me. And then the other decision was, and not only am I going to make this work for me, but I'm going to make this work for other people too. Like, I'm seriously going to squeeze out as much as I possibly can from this experience and to put it to good use. And that was how I reclaimed my power. And so I had known for a long time that I wanted to write about my experience, but I didn't know, I had never planned to do like a YouTube thing or a blog even. That just kind of all grew like organically. But I think getting meaning and getting empowered meaning out of pain and suffering that we go through is what can really help a person move forward in healing, because it's the perception that I think keeps us stuck. And I think it's also, there's that saying out there that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And it's the whole concept, that with growth comes pain. Like, life is pain. It's hard. Babies cry, like, right away. And there's all kinds of things that are painful in this life, but suffering is different. Suffering comes from attachment, and suffering comes from, in large part, it comes from attachment to things that are impermanent, and it comes from attachment to things that are an illusion to begin with. So if we're all walking around with this idea of how life should be, that we should be married by a certain age and have 2.5 kids and a house with a white picket fence and a dog named Spot by the time we're 26, and that doesn't happen, then there's a lot of suffering that's involved with that. Or if a person, like, for example, my aunt and her best friend, they were married to their husbands for close to 50 years. Good marriages for 50 years. And her best friend is having an awful time, and they lost their husbands within like a week of each other. Kind of fluke things too. And they're both having a really hard time moving forward, but her friend in particular is really having a hard time with it. And she was saying that she feels cheated. and she's angry that he died. And and of course I would never say this to her, but there was a big part of me that couldn't help but wonder, like at what point would it have been fair? Like, would it have been fair if he, you know, like had been sicker longer, or if you'd been married longer, or like at what point would you have been okay with him dying? Because it's inevitable. Like, we're all going to die. That's part of life. And but there's that suffering when we hold on to something that is impermanent to begin with. Whether, and I mean, look at like youth, age, our physical health, our just everything. Everything is so impermanent, and there's a lot of stress that can come from that. But there's a lot of freedom that can come from that too, when we realize that everything really is impermanent, and all we ever have is this moment. Like, there are no guarantees in life, and even though that's the case, even though that life it can be incredibly painful and incredibly unfair, but it's still good. There's still so much about it that really is good, and to focus on trying to just be, not even like be happy or even be content, but just be in the moment and appreciating things for what they are, really does work wonders. Because everybody's got their stuff, and I think that helped me to heal too. Because what was keeping me stuck for a long time was I had a lot of rage, and it was the feeling of, I felt like damaged goods. I felt like I had been in a hit and run car accident, twice with these two guys. And I felt like it wasn't fair. Like, I felt like, you know what? I'm a good person. I do good things. I was good to them. I did not deserve this. And this should not have happened to me. And like, why? Why is my life falling apart? Why did I have to go through, a miscarriage and a foreclosure and bankruptcy and all? Why? Like, why did I have to do all of this when all I've ever tried to do in my life is just be a good person? And then, the flying monkeys and getting rocks, like, emotional and verbal rocks thrown at me that were pushing me, pushing and pushing and pushing, and just feeling, I mean, there were so many times where I was literally like just laying there feeling like, I don't know how this is going to pan out. I do not know if I am going to have a breakdown or a breakthrough, or if I'm just going to break. I don't know. And that's a really scary place to be at when your emotions are all over the board like that. And I think that's what helped me to kind of rein that in and be like, you know what? Let's just take a few things off of the table right now. Suicide, not an option, off the table. Like, I can't even let myself go there. Like, I'm not even going to entertain that thought anymore. So that's off the table. Okay, I'm not going to let this ruin my life. That's the second mindset shift. Okay, that's off the table. That's huge right there. Like, when you just decide that, and you don't even know, like, you don't even need to know how you are going to make that not happen. Like, just make that declaration. Make it now. Like, make it right now. Like, I am not going to let this ruin my life. That's how you start getting your power and control over your life back, is by deciding that. And once you make that decision, your brain is going to start working on ways to make that come true. Because that's what our brains do. Our brains are very literal, and they love a problem. They're like a dog with a bone. They just chew on it and chew on it and chew on it until they come up with a solution. So, yeah, and all of those feelings are totally valid. Feeling broken, feeling scammed, feeling emotionally raped, feeling violated, feeling victimized. That's righteous anger. And it's you went through this, I went through this, and It would be abnormal if you didn't feel like that. So again, kind of realize, okay, like this is a healthy thing. This is a healthy response to an unhealthy situation. And, but I'm here. I'm here now. This was like some major, stuff that happened, and it's not right and it's not fair, but this is where I'm at right now. And so what am I going to do? And I've mentioned this before, there were many days where I was so overwhelmed with my life, like every aspect of my life, where it was I would have to tell myself, Dana, get out of bed, get your body into the shower. Like right foot, left foot, move your body. And just, I had to quit entertaining the overwhelm, because I felt like it was sinking me. Because there were many days where I just wanted to lay in bed and sleep. And I seriously, like, I could win a gold medal like at sleeping. I was sleeping probably 20 hours a day and I'd still wake up exhausted. I mean, it was ridiculous. And telling myself, okay, like, you have got to shower every single day. And you've got to leave the house every single day, even if it's just going to the gas station. Like, you need to go see other people. You need to do this. And, it really did help. But yeah, it's support groups, these kinds of things really, really do help, because it's validating. Like, that you're not alone, and you can see people at different stages of healing and understanding. Yeah. Salon says, oh my God, Dana, I'm having this shower problem too. So a lot of that is, yes, and sleeping too much. So a lot of that's depression, and it's overwhelm, and it's very normal. So, you will feel better if you can get your body into the shower, even if it's a 3-minute shower. Just doing that, it's kind of self-care kind of stuff. And I get it. Like, it can be really hard when you don't want to, but, doing that. Valinda says, I could not sleep at all. I was exhausted. I go through, I felt the same way too. Like, I went through two very opposites. When it first happened, I could not sleep at all and was having insomnia. I was so close to tears because I was so freaking exhausted. And then that phase passed, and then it went into sleeping a lot. And that lasted like a while. So, Danielle had asked, how did you become so informed on this subject? Lots of things. Support groups was huge. Reading. I have a book club, so we read a book a month on this topic. I worked at a domestic violence shelter. This is my life. I grew up in a lot of dysfunction, and then I dated a lot of dysfunction, and I was a lot of dysfunction, didn't realize it. And then I'm also a psychiatric nurse, and my patients are chronically mentally ill, and a lot of them also have personality disorders. So a lot of my patients are borderline or narcissist or antisocial. So it's like kind of my world. And really it's just an almost obsessive drive to figure this out. I just am so fascinated by human behavior and kind of why we do what we do. It's just, to me, it's just absolutely interesting. And then, obviously helping other people, when you start kind of realizing just the sheer number of people out there that this has impacted, that's a big driving force too, and it's interesting too, because then you hear from other people like what's worked for them or their aha moments, and you start piecing it all together. So yeah, I would say I've probably learned the most from the comments in my YouTube channel, and like, live stream the comments and from YouTube, from my live stream, and from the support groups. That has been biggest aha moments, because you've got all these other people that are going through it, and it's amazing like how somebody can say something that they might not even think is profound at all, but it might totally resonate with somebody else. And it's just, that's exactly what they needed to hear at that specific time. So V says, I hope this isn't too personal, but have you ever had one of your ex-narcs recognize you from your videos and reach out to you? No, it's not. You can ask any questions here. No, I have not. But I don't know if I would know, because I have both of their emails set up to go straight to my spam folder. So my guess is, see, they're older than me. They're about 8 or 9 years older. And I don't know if they're like big into YouTube. So part of me would be kind of surprised if they did say, but you know what though? Like, even if they did, I live 26 hours away. There's nothing that I'm saying that, oh gosh, that, that it's not true. So I have emails. So it's like, if they were to have some sort of issue about it, then, I'm telling the truth and I can back it up. So I don't feel like I'm in harm's way at all with this. And, and if they were to like get an attorney and threaten something along those lines, then, frankly, I would YouTube it, and I would just use that situation to bring even more awareness to all this. So, yeah, Stacy says, I'm not going to let anyone ruin my life. Yep. I think that is a really great declaration for all of us to make. And then, like I was saying before too, the whole using this situation for like your highest and greatest good. That's really where the magic starts to happen, is with that shift. And then it really gets exciting when you start thinking like, how could I use this for the highest and greatest good of everybody? Because you're going to start getting very different answers. And it might not be just about this situation. And everybody, of course, is going to have their own answer to that. But any difficult situation, like, it's just amazing. If you really do embrace the mindset that everything is happening for your highest and greatest good, it changes the way you think about everything. It changes. Like, I got lost today. I was running late for work, and I had a doctor's appointment in this area of town that I don't normally go in, and I was so hungry, and I was going to stop for lunch, and I got stuck in traffic in like this construction zone, and I was so like getting so irritated. But then I was like, you know what though, Dana, like, you don't know why you're stuck here. I'm assigning judgment to getting tangled up in all of this construction, but maybe, maybe I needed to be running late. Maybe there would have been a car accident or something would have happened had I not gone that way. And you just kind of, when you really kind of realize that we just don't know, like, we don't ever see events as complete. Like, we just only ever experience them as snapshots in time. It really does help to release judgment from them and just kind of realize, like, it just is. Like, these things aren't necessarily bad or good, they just are. And we're the ones that assign judgment and meaning to them. So, it helps to heal if we can assign different meaning to events. And if you realize that everything really is designed to help you grow, then when you get to that place where your anger and your rage does simmer down enough to realize that there's a lot of growth that can come from this. And it really does help to see that, because then you can start squeezing out all of the growth possible from this. And it's that right there that helps a person move from surviving to thriving, is when you start making this experience work for you. So let's see, got some questions over here on Facebook. Sherry says, without sounding dramatic or over exaggerating, this group has truly saved my life. Honestly, like Dana was, I am alone. There were nights I thought I would die in my sleep. This group is a true lifesaver. I am so glad that you're here. And this group is awesome, I have to say. And I wish I could, take credit for that, but it's the people. It's the people in the group. And that's the other cool thing about this, while I'm at it, is I think you will find, as you're joining support groups and as you're moving through your healing and all this, my guess is you're going to, like most of us, you're going to start realizing, oh my gosh, these are my people. And like, where have y'all been my whole life? And there's so many people in the support group where, you look around and like, these people are really, a lot of them are really solid, good people that are the kind of people that we've all been looking for friends and just to have in our life. And it's great, because you really do, it really helps, kind of reinforce that people are good, and that there are good people out there, and there are like your kinds of people out there. So Rhonda says, oh gosh, we made ourselves targets. I can't believe I did that. Well, Rhonda, so, okay, don't get me wrong here. I don't want anybody to feel re-victimized or that I'm blaming by any stretch. So much of this with with them exploiting our vulnerabilities, that's their stuff, right? I mean, this stuff isn't taught. And everybody has vulnerabilities, and everybody has a soft spot. So a manipulative person can really manipulate anybody. So this stuff can happen to pretty much anybody. So, but with our empty buckets and this kind of stuff, this is all at like a subconscious level. And it can be really overwhelming once we start really examining it, and we're like, oh my gosh, this is why I was falling for these people and this, that, and the other. But this does not make this your fault. And once we know better, once we know what's going on, then we can start acting differently. And that's how all growth happens. Once you realize the stove is hot, we quit touching it. Once we realize, oh my gosh, like this is what it means, to have these vulnerabilities, and this is what this looks like. And, sort of like with the online scammers on like Craigslist, right? When that stuff first came about, when online scammers were, they had scams for cars, right? So like on Craigslist, you might see somebody say, I am in the military and I have a car for sale. It's a, 2015 Volvo, and it's fantastic, and I'm only asking $8,000 for it. People were getting hooked into that stuff right and left. And not because they were stupid, not because they were an easy target. It was because they just didn't know. And then once people realized this is a scam, it's 100% of the time a scam. Craigslist put that out there, like this is a scam. Once people knew better, they started doing better. They quit falling for it. And my guess is you're gonna find that too. Once you're aware of what problematic behavior really looks like in other people and even like within ourselves, then we can start working to change it. But until we know that, and until we have that awareness and the vocabulary for it and the practice of it, we're swinging at ghosts, because again, this stuff is not taught, and it should be. So you did not do this to yourself. I mean, you would have never intentionally done any of this to yourself. So let's see here. Oh gosh, yes. People are talking about wondering if they are, they're the narcissist. And here's the thing with this. So I talk about this a lot because I think it's really important, with asking that question. Because like Martine had mentioned earlier, none of us are perfect. We all have issues. We all have stuff that we could work on. The problem with emotional manipulators isn't that that they have problematic behavior. Really. I mean, although don't get me wrong, their behavior is problematic. What's problematic about it is the fact that they don't have any acknowledgement or awareness that it's a problem. So because they're not aware that they have a problem, then they're not going to be motivated to change it, right? I mean, because that's how change works. Like, we experience pain, we realize I've got a problem. Most people hit rock bottom, and then they start making steps in that direction. With emotional manipulators that are at that level of like deep unconsciousness or like operating from like a subconscious place, they are they're at that like pre-contemplative state of change. So they're not ready. They don't see that they have an issue. They feel entitled to act the way they act. They feel justified in it. And they have that fight mentality where it's me versus you. So getting through to them is really, really difficult. So if you see stuff within yourself with, like the red flags or different types of behavior where you're like, wow, that's problematic. And what does that mean? What does that say about me? It's not so much the behavior. It's if you're aware that this is a problem, this is something that I don't like about myself, this is something that I want to work towards changing, you're good. Like, then you can work towards changing it. There's nothing that says you can't. You can. So you just keep taking steps in that direction. So let's see. But yes, there's a lot of confusion with that. And a lot of times when you're with an emotional manipulator, they will say things. They do that projection where they are, lying, cheating, manipulating, abusing, and then they'll accuse you of doing it. And it could be right after they finished doing it. It's absolutely the most bizarre thing to experience, because it does not make any sense. And oftentimes they are convinced that they are the victim of us. And I think that's their defense mechanism in their brain, because they can't handle their behavior. So that's their cognitive dissonance at work, justifying their behavior. So super interesting stuff. So, okay, guys. Well, I think let's call it a night. And there's a little bug in here. Let's call it a night. Thank you so much for joining. And we will see you next week, Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we normally go for about 2.5, 3 hours on these live streams. So if you have some questions, bring them. If I didn't get to your question, it's because I get a lot of questions on the chat and I have a hard time reading and talking and thinking all at the same time. But so don't take it personal. It's nothing to do with you. It's just me. Like, me trying to keep up with the chat and everything. So you guys take care and lots of love to you. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So I'll see you soon. Again, all my contact info for support groups, website, all of that is in the About page on YouTube. And then my website's thriveafterabuse.com. Okay, thanks. Have a good night. Bye. Okay. Gotta end it here too. Okay, good night, YouTube. We'll see you next week.